see. Okay. Hey, everybody. Hey, Roy. I'm here. Roy. I've hurried. Hopefully my tech is working. Can someone give me a shout out and just let me know that you can see me and you can hear me? Because that's always step number one. And thank you. Thank you for the respect. I appreciate that. I am joined by Jamie, my executive assistant and liaison, right, Jamie?
Yes.
Today, so that we can try to move through as many questions as possible, effectively and efficiently. We have a lot of great questions that are coming in right now in the chat box. We both have fired up a list of questions that Jamie thankfully has put together from the kind of the commercial video that I made saying that we are going to be here. So we're going to dig in after we check in. Jamie, say hey to everybody.
Hello. I hope everybody can hear me.
I can hear you, thankfully.
Great.
So, and Jamie and I haven't seen each other today. And most days of the week, probably to Jamie's dismay, we meet for like a solid hour and a half. So it is no meeting Friday. So we actually haven't checked in today. How's everything today, Jamie?
Great.
Good. My poor doggy, I was telling Jamie, and actually I put a picture of him on Instagram. My dog, ironically, has a herniated disc in his back. Poor dude. So he is much better today, but it has been one of those weeks. So I'm psyched to be here. You know it's bad when you're glad to relax into a YouTube live, right? Okay, so let me just say hi to a couple people, and then we'll get started with the questions. Ina, or I think it's probably Ina August. She is female. Ina, I've answered some of your questions on I've gone back and forth with you in the comments on the channel. Welcome. And I am working on the most amazing coach for females struggling with pornography addiction. She is conquering pornography addiction herself, and she emailed me the other day and just to give me a hey, and I'm like, hey, I'm waiting for you to be ready because the world needs you. So you can look forward to that. Okay, so Jamie, I don't know if you want to start with, Jamie's going to moderate for me. So if you are interested in finding a question, I'm just going to introduce our topic, but I know we have a lot of questions not on our topic. But what Jamie and I are going to settle into is being able to come here and answer your questions, but also to kind of stay on themes each week. This week's theme is motivation. And of course, everything we're doing here is about motivating you, inspiring you, and mostly empowering you through coaching tools to be able to leave pornography behind. But I wanted to start with a motivational quote from Zig Ziglar. If you don't know who Zig Ziglar is, he's one of the founding fathers of the motivational personal development movement. He died in 2012 after a long career, but here's the quote. He has so many quotes out there, and they're amazing. If you are not willing to learn, no one can help you. If you are determined to learn, no one can stop you. So that's what we're talking about here. It is grabbing the reins on your life, healing your brain through education. And then when we educate you and we inspire you, then you have to go to work on putting the tools into place. Indeed, the hard, the difficult part. But so I want you to stay motivated. Realize once you learn this and once you get committed, you will be unstoppable in accomplishing your goals in life. So without further ado, Jamie, where do you want to start?
So I've got a lot of great questions. We're going to try to get to them all, but this one is from Christopher Grant. It is hard to stay motivated about anything right now with the way the world is going. Our futures are literally being ripped away from us. So why not take comfort in something for a little while? So, basically just saying, why not, dive into it. It's not gonna, things are really hard. And can you elaborate on that?
I can. And I don't know if you saw the comment. I commented back to him, I think last night maybe. But I did comment back. And of course, I do see it that way, but I also don't see it that way. In any hard thing that we have to do, we always have a choice of the perspective on it. The perspective and how we engage with anything in the world, That is where the solution is, especially when it comes to motivation. So it's a framework shift. It's a paradigm shift. Is that, yeah, things are tricky in the world and things are challenging. And so one way of looking at it is that, this is all so overwhelming. I'm going to escape into alcohol, into drugs, into pornography. I'm going to escape it. But the other framework, which is what I'm encouraging people to do here for everything, and this is the way out, and this is what a porn addiction is built on, and literally the way out is through, is that when things get challenging, that's when you double down and you go, you know what? This is a challenging time, but what can I do with this time? And, don't get me wrong. I'm up at 4:30, 5 o'clock. When the pandemic hit, I was sleeping into like 7:30, 8 o'clock. It was the most luxurious thing. I'm like, I'm never setting an alarm again. Check this out. I'm literally never getting up again. But then, of course, after a couple of weeks of that, I'm like, okay, that's enough self-indulgence in staying up late, sleeping in, drinking wine, eating whatever I wanted. We made tons of food. We baked, like everybody was doing at the beginning of COVID. But I didn't persist in that. Then it was like, all right, already. Now it's time to figure out how I'm going to come out of this pandemic in a better place than I went into it. And that's the framework shift. And actually, I was just listening to a podcast. I'm a big fan of the Brian Buffini show. It's actually a podcast for realtors. And anybody out there who's listened to me before knows that my bestie is a realtor. So she turned me onto it, and it's great. It's all motivation. But in one of his most recent podcast shows, he had a prisoner of war on, and really, really interesting. And it speaks to this question on motivation. He was in a Vietnamese prisoner of war camp for 6 years. And he said when he got there, he was angry and he, just gave up and just was like, this is wrong. I'm being robbed of my life. But then he had a paradigm shift that his anger was only wounding him. Anger rots you. It doesn't even impact the people who you're angry at most times. And that he had to use the opportunity. And if you get a chance to listen to it, it's really cool. But the takeaways were that the other prisoners of war ended up getting in this beautiful workout routine. They'd work out for an hour every morning. They didn't even have clocks, but just they weren't allowed to communicate. They came up with their own communication systems, using grunts and sounds to be able to communicate with each other. So in that really, really hard time, he used that to communicate and collaborate with the other people there. And then an awesome thing he said was he dug deep inside. He had lots of time with his own mind to work through a lot of things. And he worked through all those things, used the time well, and came out a better version of himself. And that now he's sharing that message in keynotes. That's what I'm talking about here. This isn't the time to go, I'm just going to lay around in self-indulgence and pleasure. Because here's the problem. Then we'll move on to the next question. The problem is when you just go into escapism for pleasure to escape pain of a difficult reality, it always swings back in the opposite direction. So it'd be one thing if you were going to porn and it was good for you, but it's not. It's ruining your brain. It's destroying your brain's performance. It's creating anxiety, making it worse for you. It's going to disrupt your relationship. So like short-term loss, long-term huge gain, when you could take this as the opportunity for long-term gain. And that's what we're talking about here.
Awesome. I've got another question from Zeb. He says, my main issue is motivation, not porn, meaning I could last 30 days without porn, but it's very hard for me to last more than 7 days without motivation. Any particular advice you could give me with dealing with this?
It's motivation to stop masturbating is what he's talking about there. So he's like, I don't need to watch porn, but, going back to masturbation, it's harder to stay away from that. And I know people out there want to talk about this because using masturbation as a mood regulation technique. So there's two big things we need to talk about here. Is that you're going back to either pornography or masturbation, or you can put in any acting out behavior there, webcams, anything online, escorts, other human beings, anything that's unhealthy sexuality to regulate your mood. And that's what I talked about in this week's videos. science shows that the biggest motivator for people to watch pornography or to masturbate is to de-stress themselves. So it's an unhealthy de-stressing mechanism. So the solution is twofold. Number one, you have to find a healthy way to take the edge off of stress. So I would contend that you can set up a life that's less stressful. And those are tolerations. You can figure out the things that are driving you crazy about your life. Some can be fixed and eliminated and alleviated. Others can be dealt with in a different way. And literally, this week has been the craziest week for me, is that like right now I am dealing with every single kid, besides my stepson who's 30, but 5 of my teenagers all have something going on that requires me to do it for them. And none of them are like easy, pleasant things. So I've been in like survival mode. It's talking about survival mode. I've been in survival mode all week. Survival mode is very stressful, but I'm only going to do it until I can get all these things solved. And it's just kind of the perfect storm that came together. Then my poor dog is hurt too. It's like literally like every day I'm just in survival mode, taking what comes at me. But I will not live my entire life like that. I live the majority of my life in thrive mode, moving forward, creating good lives for my kids, and being on purpose in my own work, making sure I have enough of my hobbies, building my relationship with my husband, all the things that are important. That's what people can get to, a thrive mode. So when you're in thrive mode, you don't need to masturbate every 2 weeks because you're doing it to regulate your mood. So I want you to recognize that and think, okay, I know it feels like sexual feelings or sexual thoughts, but if you peel that back a layer, it really is escaping from an emotion or a feeling that is uncomfortable for you, that you don't want to have to deal with. But the solution is, if you deal with it, it goes away. If you escape from it, it stays there and it brews. So the solution that we're talking about in all of this is to move towards the difficult feelings and resolve them. If they're old past hurts, go to work on it. Use Gestalt techniques or actually deal with the people who have hurt you. If it's current stressors, figure out a way to eliminate them, reduce them, and then have a good approach to those. Then you won't need masturbation every 2 weeks, and you'll find that you'll be able to go longer and longer. Now, one more aspect about this, and we'll move on to the next question. That is talking about, masturbation for mood regulation, and that's what is going on. But the second thing is, if it's not sexual thoughts, then, what do I do about sex? Is you have to build healthy sexuality. Because if you have a problem with pornography or masturbation, your brain is in a hypersexual mode. It's looking for sexual things to take the edge off. So the solution's twofold: is you find a healthy way to deal with stressors, but you also establish healthy sexuality. And we're going to create a playlist in September, so you know exactly what I'm talking about there. But it's using your libido, and we're going to need to talk about that at some point, your libido, your actual feelings of sexuality, to share them with another human being and to have fun and connection. And I know, and if it's okay, Jamie, I know one person in the chat asked if oxytocin is affected by porn addiction. It's Amir the vegan. Amir, yeah, oxytocin is very much impacted. And I talk about it in many of the videos. Oxytocin is the neurotransmitter for connection or linking you to something. So if you go back to pornography, you've linked your brain to the screen. Now check this out. If you go back to masturbation, you've linked your brain to yourself. You don't want that. You want your brain linked to a honey in the real world who you can have tons of fun, engaging, erotic sex with, that your brain becomes linked to that person. And so that's the goal too. Healthy sexuality, not hypersexuality, linking your brain to another person. And I know some people are like, I don't have anybody. We're going to talk about that in August. But, it's important. Most people, all people, basically, healthy people want connection with other people in the world. And that's why we want to use oxytocin in a powerful way, sexually, with other people or a partner, instead of wasting that oxytocin on a screen or on yourself.
That's awesome. Swallowman made a comment. I understand that porn degenerate your brain. But why does it affect me physically too? I start getting sick, tired, dark circles, lethargic, cold, itchy eyes. Around day 7, this all disappears. Why is this, Doc?
Yeah. So what runs your whole body? Your brain. Your brain is the hard drive, the software that's in there, basically. In your hard drive, it's all the components running all the rest of it. So when your brain's not working well, then you get a lot of mental and physical problems. So it basically, the way that your brain uses electrical energy is that your brain's running too fast or it's running too slow. Too fast is anxiety, too slow is boredom or overwhelm. And we know that going back to the screen or back to masturbation creates that brain pattern. So when you're out there in the extremes, your brain is not functioning in the optimal pattern. The goal is to bring your brain back into the middle, into the medium speeds, so that it performs optimally. But if you're out here in the extremes, then your brain's not working as well as it should, which will give you a whole host of mental, psychological, cognitive, which means thinking, and physical problems, because the electrical energy impacts the neurotransmitter release and it impacts just about every function in your body, which then is changed for the worse when you keep going back to it. Now, when you stop going back, what happens is then your brain goes through withdrawal. It's homeostasis is what it's trying to get back to. But if you've been engaged in this habit for a long time, it's neo-homeostasis, meaning it's the new norm that you've put it into. So when you take it out of the new norm and you try to get it back to optimal, that's a gap that needs to be bridged. And so you'll have some physical symptoms, but if you wait long enough, it'll taper off and you'll get back to homeostasis where your brain's in a healthier spot. And I know from looking at the comments and responding to them on the channel, a lot of people out there are getting there. They're doing it. They're moving through those withdrawal symptoms. They're able to push through and use the strategies in the videos and be able to, get to the other side of that so they get back to as close to the optimal pattern as possible.
Wow. Dan Arthur, excuse me. I've been struggling all my life to stop masturbating, and anytime I masturbate, I feel like I don't have any feeling to masturbate again. But within a few days, I feel like I want to do it again. And if I try to stop myself, I can't stop thinking about it the whole day. Is there how can you be set free from that?
Yeah, so that's the cycle. That's the cycle that we're here to break. And so the cycle goes like this. It's a circle, a vicious cycle, a vicious circle, in that the way that your brain uses electrical energy and the way that it's using neurotransmitters shifts throughout this cycle. So for some people, this cycle's every 3 hours. For some people, this cycle's daily. For some people, it's weekly. Others, it's monthly. But the way the cycle goes is your brain is triggered, usually by a stressor. Then you get the thought, I'll watch porn, I'll masturbate. You already get a dopamine hit when you get that thought. It's trickling. The dopamine starts. You start to feel better because you know you're moving towards dopamine, which means you're moving away from stress and cortisol. Cortisol is the stress neurotransmitter, moving towards dopamine, the seeming pleasure neurotransmitter, which numbs you out. So then what happens is as you move towards it and you masturbate, your brain becomes super numbed out and it feels good. It gets that flood of dopamine. Unfortunately, the flood of dopamine doesn't last forever, and it's damaging your brain when that happens. But then as the cycle continues, dopamine goes lower after you're done masturbating. So when dopamine's low, or actually when you're riding the high of the dopamine, you're like, I don't need to masturbate anymore. I feel good. And you might be able to ride that dopamine high for a couple of days. It's different for all people. And an interesting thing is, I can see that in people's brain graphs when they use their Muse headband. And when we're working together, I can see in their brains basically how long it stays numbed out with that dopamine. And then I can see that dopamine going lower and that cortisol stress spiking up, meaning that then you're going to need to go back because basically that cycle kept going. And now dopamine's low, cortisol's high, and your brain's like, I'm stressed. So it really doesn't have anything to do with the sexual thoughts. Like I've already said, it has to do with, I feel stressed. Now I don't feel stressed. So I don't need to masturbate anymore. Oh no, I feel stressed again. I need to masturbate to regulate my mood, and the vicious cycle continues. The way out is to break the cycle, and it's tricky, but that's what, first of all, and Jamie can talk a little bit about our program before we wrap up, but when people need more support, there is a comprehensive program, all the aspects that you need to be able to address or you need to be able to think about, and then some of them need to be resolved. And the sum is different for every person, but all those pieces are in the program that I've created, and it's all built on neuroscience. Every piece of the program is proven effective by science. So for a lot of people, you need to be able to look at all of those pieces and move through those pieces and resolve them. And Jamie can attest to this too. It's such a beautiful thing. We get emails every day from people, and you shared one with me today again. And it's like, just amazing how people can move through this really hard time of getting from where you are to where you want to be, because there is a tricky place in there for most people where they feel like they want to relapse because the cycle isn't broken. So the best way to do it is just to break the cycle and rip the Band-Aid off and push through the discomfort, recognizing it's not going to kill you, but it's tricky. That's the best way to do it, because your brain unwires as quickly as possible. Then you start using the strategies to rewire it as quickly as possible. And it becomes much easier and faster when you have a plan, you commit to it, and then you have strategies to move through it. And so that's the way. And I'm trying to do that in the YouTube videos. And it's not as organized because unfortunately I'm one person trying to, help all of you. And I'm getting there, because we're going to create these playlists and we're going to add more content. We've got a plan to bring you more organized content to be able to help you really move through that difficult part. But you got to break the cycle. So just recognize when your brain goes, I want to masturbate again, it's stress that's telling you to do that. And finding a healthy outlet for stress. That's why I always tell people, create a pivot plan. So here's an actual action step, is create a pivot plan ahead of time, so that the next time you feel like you want to masturbate, you go do something else that's dopamine producing. And hopefully it's something with connection with people in the real world, because that will help you get the dopamine that your brain is looking for. But recognize it's lower levels, because pornography and masturbation are a super normal stimulus. They are giving you more dopamine than you can get in the world. So, but you can do it. You got to break the cycle, make a plan, commit to it, go do something else. And when you crush through one of those first couple times, you're going to have small wins. And I made a video on this. Your brain gets dopamine from succeeding. So when you succeed a little, you're going to get more dopamine too. And it might not be easy and it might not be comfortable, but if you can get comfortable with being uncomfortable in this process, you can move through it and succeed.
I've got one from Paul. It says, I wish Dr. Trish could talk to young men coming up about the harms of porn on the brain. And also lots of men view women after looking at porn. Like, what is, there definitely is a different view after they watch it. And it's.
Yeah. Objectification for sure.
That's it.
And Paul, I have a plan. And that's why I created a nonprofit organization. What you're talking about is super important to me. And actually, I got the idea from many of you in this awesome community. I got the idea because people would write in the comments, we should teach this to kids when they're 9, 10, 11, 12, because that's when people start. Nobody's talking to them because of fear or, not wanting to address it. And I'm like, I'm just the girl to do this. So in the nonprofit that I'm creating, the plan is to create a program, a digital program, a very well-produced one once we get there, a well-produced digital program that could be offered in sex ed classes in middle school or early high school, so that people know the dangers of pornography when they are first being exposed to it. Because what the science shows is it hijacks the brain, that young brain, and it's giving it this flood of dopamine. And it's much harder to unlink that connection when someone's brain's hijacked. So hopefully through education, and many people have told me, I wish I knew this back then, because it'd be easier for me to get away from it. But at least you know it now. So that's the good part. But we're going to make a program and we're going to get it into school systems to prevent it from starting for many people. And that's part of our nonprofit organization's goal. And can't wait to get there.
Awesome. Mike Bold, how do I turn this addiction into a career or coaching to help others stop and reboot like you are?
Yeah, and I love that. So we also have big plans here, but I can tell you in the short run, something to do in the short run, and then a goal for the long run. In the short run, I am trained through the American Academy of Sex Addiction Therapists, which I hold in very high esteem. Awesome training. So if you are interested in that, in this area, I would go there first. But I will tell you that you have to have life coach certification or some coaching certification before you can add that certification on top of it, or you have to be a licensed therapist. So there are prerequisites to that, and there should be, right? Because this isn't for the faint of heart, and we want to make sure that when people are helping other people, they're trained in the nuances of that. But I get this question a lot, so I also want to tell you that the program, I get this question a lot from people who've been through my program, because they're like, this is the most awesome thing I've ever learned. I want to be able to share this with other people. I will tell you, my program probably only has like 5% of what I've learned through the American Academy of Sex Addiction Therapists. The other 95% is what I have learned over the last, 25 years as a professional in the area of brain development, brain disorders, brain degeneration, cognitive science, and neurological modulation. So, it's bringing a lot of aspects, but that would be a great start. In the long run, a really cool thing that we have on tap is that we want to create the program that I created. It's called Porn Brain Reboot. We want to be able to create PBRA. So basically, there's AA for Alcoholics Anonymous. There are right now SA, Sex Addiction Anonymous. There's SAA. There's actually a bunch of different 12-step recovery groups that have to do with sexual addiction. That might be a start for you too, because you could go to those groups and be a sponsor or be a leader in those groups if you felt like that was something that's calling you. But as part of a 12-step recovery program, which I like parts of, but I think other parts might not serve people fully, is that you have to, say that you're a sex addict. And, honestly, I'm not that comfortable with that classification. I'm not even that comfortable in Alcoholics Anonymous. Like every single time you go for the rest of your life, you have to proclaim you're an addict because, if you're an addict in recovery, you can get to a point where you remain vigilant in creating the life you want, but you don't have to always remain vigilant against, quote unquote addiction. Anyways, my point is we're creating Porn Brain Reboot Anonymous so that we can have people who succeed in our program or succeed using the tools that we're presenting on YouTube and want to give back to other people. But it's a way for people to reboot their brains from pornography consumption in an anonymous way. It's not necessarily a 12-step group, and you definitely don't have to call yourself an addict for the rest of your life. But you do have to want to have an interest in rebooting your brain from porn and masturbation and sexual acting out. So we're going to bring that to people as soon as we can, but we have some ducks to get in a row first. But that should give you some short-term action steps that you could take. And in the long run, you can keep that in the back of your mind.
And the difference between Dr. Leigh's program and other people's program, I'm just going to put this in there, is it starts in the brain. So her research is definitely, geared towards healing the brain. So that is a huge, benefit to this program versus other programs.
And Jamie, just so people know about Jamie's been in the recovery movement, has worked in it, has been steeped in it for a very long time and has worked in it. How many years did you work in recovery facility?
It was 6 years.
Yeah, so that's a long time, so she's been in this movement for a really long time. So she brings a different perspective. And the approach that I am telling you here, this is why this is important. What Jamie's talking about is, for a long time, we know that a successful way to get rid of any compulsive behavior is a biopsychosocial approach. So that's looking at and this will lead into, I know there's a question on, if I have a genetic or a familial, if it runs in my family to move towards addiction. And the question's about exercise, and I'll answer that question next if that's okay. But let me finish the thought is that, there are familial components that can push you in that direction. That's the bio. The psycho is your mentality, the stressors, kind of what you've learned, how you've learned to deal with stress, which we know it becomes unhealthy when porn and masturbation are in the mix for a long time. And the last piece is social, looking at your environment, looking at your culture, looking at your family dynamics, all of that, environmental. But what's not in that old school approach is neurological, your brain. And we know science proves that this starts in the brain. It is a dysregulated brain pattern. So the ultimate solution is to regulate the brain pattern. And that's what the program that I've created does. That's what I'm always trying to teach you, what's happening in your brain, because I believe neuroeducation is really important. If you know how your brain's working and why it's pushing you in a direction, then you can make better decisions. So the neurological piece is really important. Plus the brain training headband, people across the world are using it successfully to unwire that brain, rewire it towards the optimal pattern, and move it in the right direction. So I'll just springboard off that, if it's okay, Jamie, before you ask me another question, and talk about, maybe you can find whose question that is, but I know there's a question saying that, if I lean towards addiction, is it okay if I go into an exercise addiction? And I will tell you, this is something that many people do, especially when they have hypersexuality or compulsion towards sexual behaviors. So what's happening is your brain needs a lot of dopamine, like I've already told you, to offset stress and to regulate your mood. So following that line of thinking logically, replacing a sexual addiction, we'll just call it that, we won't split hairs on the term for right now. Going towards a sexual addiction obviously is very unhealthy, especially if it leads you to acting out behaviors, which it does many times. So if you replace that with an exercise addiction, let's say, and now you're cranking it all the time and you're working out 2 times a day and you're jacked and you're ripped and you're feeling good, that is better, but it's still you needing to regulate your mood in some extreme way. And I work with people historically. I've worked with people not always having to do with sex, but I've worked with people in my practice who have exercise addictions. And it is a compulsion when you can't stop doing it. And men and women, we won't even worry about the genders there. I have one woman in mind where she's a physician, raising a family, has to work out, doing CrossFit multiple times a day. And then she was trying to only work out once on Sunday, and she couldn't even do it. She had to work out twice on Sunday. And that's when she tried to give up the second one on Sunday, she's like, yeah, this is a problem for me. And, so it's a habit replacement. So yeah, that might be okay in the short run as you are actually digging in and going inside and going into your brain to figure out why you need to regulate your mood in such an extreme way. That is at the root of all of that. When your brain becomes healthy, things come at you and you can deal. You don't need to go do something to get a big dopamine hit, but that's what your brain's trained to do right now. Ultimately, what you want is not to have to do that. You want your brain in the middle, like I already talked about, using medium speed for calm focus, because when you're there, stuff can come at you, like 5 children blowing up your phone with texts about all the things that they need right now. And some of them are challenging, and some of them are 16-year-old stuff you still have to deal with because it's challenging to a 16-year-old. So when that's happening, either it's a million things, I can go, okay, this is slightly overwhelming, but I got this. And I can bring myself down into the middle. I don't have to go, I can't handle this. I have to go do something right now because I can't handle that. That's the difference. That's where I want you to get, where you don't have to go do something to handle the anxiety that's building in you, because you have daily habits of offloading that anxiety to get your brain back to the middle. And you can see that on the brain training headband. You can see where your brain is at on the graphs. And I know when people get the headband, and I created a course, this is not a plug to buy it, but so many people are asking me to teach them how to use the headband. I just don't have the bandwidth for it, that I've created a program where you can, it's $49. Again, it's a donation towards the cause. It's all going back into the cause. But when you purchase it, you can learn how to use the headband and learn how to interpret the graphs. And then, you can see, yeah, wow, my brain is really stressed out. It's really active. You can know your brain is calming down. You can know your brain is moving forward. What else there, Jamie?
So I've got a couple questions from Interpreet. He's asking, does semen retention improve memory And does it decrease the size of the
One's
brain?
member. Oh, the brain. I thought
The brain.
I know. I'm always promising Jamie that that we won't have to talk about certain things. And that's why I thought you were like poising to figure out like, how do I say this? But okay, the brain. We could definitely handle that one. And we can also handle the member if we need to. But okay, now semen retention as a philosophy and a way of life. Like if you've seen me and heard me talk, I'm not a huge fan of that because that's not necessarily the healthiest way to live your life. What I want for you, Pete, is that who asked? I know I saw something. What I want for you is to have a healthy brain, healthy sexuality, and a healthy life that you are rocking out on purpose and you feel so psyched to get up every day, which that includes healthy sexuality for 99.9% of the people, that your brain wants that. So instead of denying your brain that, we want to teach your brain to be able to have healthy sexual relationships with a honey or a partner that is for connection and intimacy, but also pleasure. So it's the perfect neurochemical cocktail of serotonin for happiness, dopamine for pleasure, oxytocin for connection, and there's other ones mixed in there. It's the cocktail that's good for your brain. But when you're going back to the screen, what happens is then your brain is getting flooded with this dopamine intensity. It's intensity. Your brain's getting a ton of it and it's not healthy. And what happens is then your brain is being fried out. The dopamine receptors are being fried out. So to me, it's not about semen retention. And I know people think that juices your brain up. It's about balance. It's about not needing to control what's going on with your sexuality and your mood regulation. It's about having your mood regulated because your brain's in a healthy spot. It's about having a healthy sex life because your brain's in a balanced, healthy spot. So, to me, semen retention still is an extreme of I know for younger people that can be a good thing because if the options are semen retention or pornography and masturbation, then semen retention's the better of those two. But honestly, semen retention plus intimacy and building connection with other people towards developing a relationship if you're younger, that is how you can develop a healthy brain, because likely your brain's going to be craving that idea of at least sexual connection in the future. So you don't want to deny something evolutionarily is in there neurologically. That's how I feel about that. But let's say you're 16 and you don't have a partner and let's say 18, just to keep it clean here on YouTube, right? You're a grown adult, you're 18 years old, you don't have a partner, and the reason I say 16 is because people email us all the time. I'm 16 years old. I don't have a partner. What do I do about this? This way you are building intimacy with people in your world and moving towards potential sexual connection and intimacy with a partner. So you might be doing semen retention, quote unquote, for some time, but it's so that you are moving towards healthy sexuality. And I hope that helps you kind of understand at least my take on it. But to have people be in a semen retention life for the rest of their life, that's, that I don't think is a healthy, balanced way of approaching it.
All right, I've got one from Mohammed. He says, thanks a lot. What can we do when the videos of porn are recorded in our minds? We like to have a memory of porn without going to watch it on the internet when the hijacker says, come back. In other terms, how do I manage my mind when I remember those videos?
Yep, this is a great question. And I have been eagerly getting ready, mentally at least, to make a video about this, because when I was back in graduate school, you love when you can actually put a class in graduate school to work. That's what I'm talking about here. When I was in graduate school, I remember in this sketchy, folding chair classroom, which I went to a great university, so that was not the norm. Normally it's like, beautiful university classrooms, but I was in this like basement room with like 12 chairs in graduate school. And because I earned 2 PhDs at the same time, I was working on my cognitive science degree. I was like an outsider. I didn't know anybody. And I felt dumb most of the time because everybody else had a bachelor's and a master's degree, and I was working on my PhD. So anyways, long story short, I distinctly remember this entire class because of the dynamics of it. The class was on memory. So I've been talking to a lot of people about fantasy in your mind lately. And as I've been telling them, my thoughts on it based upon what I've learned, it occurred to me that this memory class, the takeaway that I had from this class on memory, completely applies to this situation, which is why I want to make the video. But when it comes to fantasy popping in your mind, your brain, in terms of holding memory, there's short-term memory, there's long-term memory, there's many mechanisms there's working memory, there's lots of types of memory. So basically, you have to view something or think about something over and over and over to get it from the shorter term memory to the long-term memory. And when you do that through repetition and, going back over and over and over, that is what bores it into your memory. But now here's the important part of memory. Memory isn't a time thing. Things don't stay in your memory forever based upon time. It's not how much time passes and when will it go. What it is it's a quantity thing. It's an amount thing, not time, but amount. So the way memory works, and this is the whole takeaway from that class, the way memory works is you will have memories as long as those are the things that you're putting in. But if you put lots of other things into your memory, the older memories fade. So the way to handle the fantasy thoughts, and this is what I say in all the videos. So when I remembered this class, I'm like, this is a beautiful, easy concept to bring it together, is that when you get on purpose in your work, which I'll explain in a second, when you get on purpose in your relationships, which I'll also explain in a second, and your hobbies, you are filling your brain on a daily basis with new stuff, new important salient stuff to you. So when you create a project, and I encourage everybody to create a project now, come up with a project when you get off this live, decide what project you're going to do this weekend. And it's important because today's Friday, and a lot of people, the reason we made these YouTube lives on Friday is because the weekends are tough for people. They flounder. They don't have anything going. This weekend, get a project going. And I always have a project going. My hubs always has a project going. My kids basically always have a project going because that makes a full life. I have work projects going. We have personal projects going. It is a great thing to do. So when you create a project, then you'll have the thoughts about your project. So for example, I'm always talking about my new motorcycle project, but I'm working on that still. My hubs, what he has been working on, the man's killing me. The man likes to spend money. Hopefully he's not watching. He's definitely not watching because he's golfing. He likes to do two things, golf and spend money. But he decided that he really is into, getting we have lawn service, but the lawn service has changed. And he's ebbed and flowed on this for years. So the lawn service did everything in our yard. So now he was going to make it so the lawn service did nothing. And he was going to buy a lawn tractor and make the kids do it. I'm like, oh yeah, that's not going to happen. Plus he's done it 3 times where he's bought the lawn tractor, then it sits there and then he gets lawn service again. And then we have to sell or donate the lawn tractor. Not doing that again, bro, is what I said. So he got someone to mow the lawn, but he's going to do all the bushes in that. So he went out and bought electrical lawn trimming tools. So he comes home with all these eco tools. But that's a cool project because first of all, now we don't have to pay for that aspect. So, he invested in these tools, but he spent all this time figuring out which tools he needed. And I've said before on these videos, or definitely in the lives, something my husband's done forever to save his sanity in the life that we've created for ourselves is he golfs. He usually golfs on Friday and Sunday, which is a really good thing for him. Saturday mornings, he always gets up and goes to Lowe's. Sometimes he buys stuff, sometimes he doesn't. We call it Lowe's therapy. It's like a running joke for the last 20 years. I like going to Lowe's and he's like looking at me like, of course. But it's a good thing for him because it creates, an out for him to be able to chill by himself. And so in the Lowe's therapy, he bought these eco tools. Then he went out and he trimmed everything up. It created a beautiful weekend project for him. Find a project. And going back to the point is when you're thinking about your eco tools and you're looking up videos on how to hedge your bushes so that they look nice. I'm sure somebody will distort that. Hopefully they don't. But when you look those things up, right? When you look those things up now, like, Monday night, your brain's thinking about lawn care, not fantasy. That fantasy starts to go away. So that's why I say get on purpose in your work. Find something in your work that you care about. And, in our work, Jamie had great ideas in our work. And so the ideas she had in yesterday's long meeting about, we're putting together a study eventually to measure the outcomes of our program. And so we're getting some ducks in a row for that. And so Jamie had a really cool suggestion on how we could get that started in a simple way, which means she was thinking about that. And that is something that then is in her mind and she has. So do that in your work, do that in your relationships. So like the Hubs and I, we're always trying to do things for each other. And we're going to talk about healthy relationships starting next week. I'm going to have to give it a snappier name, but right now I'm calling it, how to be a healthy partner to attract a healthy partner. But I don't know if that's going to do it on YouTube. So what I came up with, how that goes. Someone says, I like your snappy names. The new one I came up with is something like how to have great sex and a great relationship too, which is the same thing. You have to be a healthy partner to attract a healthy partner. So we're going to be talking about that. But, my kids will say to me, hey, Ma, can we go, play basketball? Because I play basketball with my one son. And I'll be like, sorry, dude, I can't because I'm going to spend time with Dad. I'm relationship building. That's what I always tell the kids because they'll be like, what are you guys doing tonight? I'm like, Dad and I are relationship building. So like today he's golfing. I have some things I'm doing to be on purpose, and then I'm going to meet him for dinner. And I don't even totally want to go, but it's relationship building. So it's important. He organized this whole thing. So funny. He brings me my phone so I can text my bestie to make sure that she's available to meet us. It's important to him. So I'm like, what? This is important to him. It becomes important to me, relationship building. So we're going to talk about that because you can have a fantastic relationship. Jamie has one. I have one. You all can have one too if you want it. So we're going to talk about that in the next 2 months. Okay, Jamie, throw something else at me before I keep going there.
All right. So I'm kind of going to intertwine a couple questions. This one's a little long. It's from Ali. I've been suffering from severe porn-induced erectile dysfunction and porn-induced premature ejaculation. Nothing was working for me. I went to a urologist. He didn't think porn was the cause and didn't believe in the NoFap community. He gave me SSRI depressants, and it helped me last longer and get a good erection. This worked really well. I was not enjoying the sexual intercourse as my libido was completely diminished and I had gained a lot of weight as a result. I was on a great routine for over a year and a half until I had enough of SSRIs and the side effects. So he started to wean off. Right now I have weaned down. My libido is slowly coming back, and I feel that I can maintain okay erection during sexual activity. I feel like my PIED has improved. However, my PE has returned, and I have a lot of decrease. I have decreased the SSRI dosage. I went from lasting a long time to not lasting at all, or a short amount of time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he mentioned a couple of supplements that he put in, but could you please explain how I can resolve this issue without having to go back to SSRIs? I've tried a number of different things. And then I saw a comment about chastenberries. Have you ever heard of that? And I know that you are, not a fan of, talking about medical things.
As they say, here comes the disclaimer first. The disclaimer that I tell everybody is when people put on, I'm really feeling terrible. Are these side effects normal? I'm always like, let me answer that. But if you don't feel well, go to your doctor. So, of course, when it comes to prescriptions, legally, I'm not allowed to tell you how I feel about that. What I'm supposed to tell you is go to your prescribing doctor and ask them about weaning you off. But what I can tell you is, A, what I would do if I was in your situation. And number two, I can educate you, neuroeducate you on what's going on in your brain that's happening with all of that. And that's where we're going to start. But I've given you the disclaimer that, if you want to talk about your medications, you have to talk about it with your doctor. So what's going on in your brain is that when you use an SSRI, it basically lowers power in your brain. So when it lowers power, it takes the edge off of anxious feelings. It's actually an anti-anxiety medication that they also use for depression. So it's lowering power in the system. And so when the system's lowered, you don't feel as anxious. You don't feel the need to regulate your mood as much because your mood is chilled out because of the chemicals that are in your body. But at the same time, it's lowering the power in your brain so much that it lowers your quote unquote libido. And we have to visit this topic of libido, but I'm going to remind you what I think about it right now. So your libido decreases because everything, the power in your brain is decreasing the feelings of everything in your system. And as most people comment on the channel, that is a Band-Aid. That's just a Band-Aid fix for a little bit of time to help you. And, I think if you feel depressed, I've told lots of people this, if you feel depressed or you can't get out of your bed or you're at your wit's end, there's a role for medication, but it is acute. It's a Band-Aid. If you're bleeding out, you need to put a bandage on your arm. But do you wear a bandage for the whole rest of your life because of a wound? Absolutely not. If the wound's deep enough, you get stitches. And I always call neurofeedback brain training stitches. I have for a really long time. You need stitches to help that wound heal. Then, of course, you need to have strategies not to get that kind of wound again. And that's what we're talking about here. So what happens is when the power in your brain lowers, then your desire decreases. Now, let's visit the thought of, I used to last for a really long time. Now I don't last that long. I've talked to lots of people. And I made a video saying that I forget the averages. I looked up the average time that a person should engage in a sexual activity. And for anybody who's had a sexual activity, lasting for an hour, lasting for 2 hours, I know to the hypersexual brain, that feels like a performance accomplishment. But this is an experience, right? So, it doesn't mean you should be having experiences that are that long. The hypersexual brain wants it. So lasting long is esteemed. But in my world of healthy sexuality, having a wonderful experience that's in the half-hour range, and I know the range was like 15 to 30 minutes, is, it ranges from 2 minutes to 30 minutes, but the idea is, that it's in this heavy range. Having that experience is what's good for your brain. When you linger in a performance-driven experience for a really long time, you're flooding your brain with dopamine, especially if it's by yourself and if it involves pornography, or if you're able to do it with a human being. A lot of times, and this is digressing a little, but fear of intimacy is at the core of all of this issue. So, and I know some people might not like the word fear, but not being able to engage in a truly intimate experience where you expose yourself and you feel like you can, put yourself all out there with another person. And it involves fear of rejection, but really putting yourself out there, that is what's at the core. So when you're engaged in a performance that's just for the pleasure and for how it seems to you, that's not intimacy. That's just a performance, which you think should last long. But that's hypersexuality. Healthy sexuality can be short and sweet with connection and intimacy, half hour. So now swinging the opposite direction. So what happens is, let me finish that real quick, is that if you're lasting a really long time, it's because the dopamine receptors in your brain are not working properly. They're allowing your brain to go long, long, long because you need a long, massive amount of stimulation to be aroused, not healthy. And every time you do it, you're actually making your brain worse because you're giving it this 1 hour, 1.5 hours of intense stimulation to get there. So then on the other hand, if it's PE, And again, this might have to do with the cycle, is that if you have premature ejaculation, it can be because of the arousal going from 0 to 60. But again, it's out here in the extremes. It is not in the middle of where we want your brain to be, that it can have a middle but healthy experience that lasts the perfect amount of time, not too long, not too short. It goes back to regulating your brain. So bringing it back to medications don't regulate your brain. They're a Band-Aid. They mask what's going on. The brain pattern underneath it is still there. It's just masked. So to be able to actually fix that brain pattern, you have to engage in some techniques that will actually change that brain pattern. We know that neuromodulation, brain training, does that, scientifically proven to do that. We also know that cognitive behavioral therapy techniques can do it, especially when added to brain training. Mindfulness, positive psychology techniques. There's a lot of techniques that work, but usually a person's brain performance pattern is blocking them from using those strategies, which is why I encourage people to use the brain training headband as their approach, because it will start making your brain go in the healthier mode so that you can start to heal it and bring it back to this optimal pattern. So you won't need to go forever. You don't even want to anymore. You want to have a healthy experience and be able to engage in it for the perfect amount of time. And you'll be able to last that amount of time because your brain is in the middle. Hopefully I've covered all the aspects. I think I got to most of them. Let me talk about erectile dysfunction real quick, though, because what I didn't talk about, I know lots of people want to know, is porn-induced erectile dysfunction. The reason that happens is because of what I've just said. Your brain gets flooded with dopamine, and it is so numbed out, and the receptors get fried, as do the reward center in your brain. The easiest way to talk about it is it literally gets fried out, so it doesn't get activated anymore. When you go to be with your partner, it's not arousing enough because what you have been watching on the screen, and if you've been engaging in masturbation, the manual stimulation physically that you give yourself is more than, basically your partner doesn't have as much mental stimulation or manual stimulation. Even if they are the most beautiful person in the world doing the sexiest things in the world, it still isn't as big as that supernormal stimulus. So then your brain needs that very high level of stimulation to be able to have your member, as we're calling it, get erect. And so then if you don't give it that high level of physical and mental stimulation, you can't do it. So again, the way to get back to being able to have a perfect erection, to be able to engage in healthy sex with your partner, is to not flood your brain out with all of that stimulation, mentally or physically. So this goes back to the questions on pornography and masturbation. What's the relationship? And why is masturbation a problem still? And why should we give it up and go for semen retention? It links everything together. It's so that you can heal your brain. And then the further away that your brain is from the optimal brain pattern, that is the factor in how long or how much work, because again, it's a quantity thing, not a time thing. How much work needs to be done to bring your brain back to that optimal performance pattern? And so if you've been engaging in those activities for a long time, especially with intensity and more frequency and consistency and longer sessions, there's more work to be done. You can use the things that I named to rewire your brain towards the optimal pattern. And that's how people can bring themselves online as fast as possible. Jamie,
awesome.
Maybe one or two more questions, and then we'll wrap up.
Okay, that's what I was going to say. We're going to have to wrap up soon. I am going to just put it out really quick for people that are interested in the program. If you have questions, you can email me at drtrishleigh.com, and we will be glad to give you information about the program. But a couple last questions. I know that porn is bad for me, but I can't seem to quit fully. I don't count my days as I feel like I'm waiting for a disaster to happen. My question is, how do I create the self-discipline to quit porn and stay away from the things which trigger me to watch? I don't want to relapse again.
Yep. So discipline, that's the theme. This will probably be a good question to wrap up on, because our theme for this week is motivation. And in the video on motivation, what I say is you have to create the discipline. Discipline's not easy to start. New habits are not easy to start. They become easier once you get them started. So to create the motivation so that you can keep moving forward, make a plan. Change things, change as many things as possible. Like I know this, I say this all the time, but the easiest thing to do is to make a plan that includes changes to your current physical and mental space. So change something, get rid of your phone, lock it in a lockbox, put it in a public place when you go to bed, change your mental state, get a book. I meant to look up a good book. I have a couple of books in play. I meant to look up a good book before we came here today. I will look up a book for next week. And actually one popped up that I was interested in and I didn't get it, but I will make sure I get a book recommendation. Get a book or go online, look up quotes like the Zig Ziglar quote, because when you put positive things in about what you want to create, it's going to get rid of the noise from the past and it's going to keep you on track. That's why I read every single morning as part of my morning routine. I never skip it because it sets the stage for my day and it keeps me in the space that I've worked so hard to get to. So then I can deal with all the stuff that's coming at me, like the 53 texts that came through in the last hour. But, so this way, create a plan, but then make yourself do it. Set alarms in your phone to go do the new things. Get yourself a planner. Use the calendar in your phone. Jamie knows this. I don't leave anything to chance. I try to leave as least amount of things up in my brain so my brain space is free. And then I schedule everything. I schedule my workouts. I schedule time with the hubs so we still have a relationship when these kids leave. I schedule time with each one of my kids so that I can build a relationship with them. I don't leave it up to chance that we're going to have time to hang out. I make sure I have time to hang out with each of them. And they know it. So when I say to them, you want to go do this? And they go, no, they know it's not an option. We're going to play basketball. Or do you want to go, come eat with me? Different things. They're all scheduled. And, Jamie's getting in the hang of that with me now that we've been working together, where she puts things into my calendar, or I tell her all the time. One thing that I always say is that I had this idea when I was falling asleep last night, and I talked it into the notes in my phone. That is a thing I do. When your brain slows down at night, hopefully yours does, because that can be tricky when you're stuck in this addiction cycle. But when your brain slows down at night and it's moving to that slow speed, that's the creativity speed. I'm aware of that. So I always have a lot of good thoughts at night. So I have my phone there and I just talk that idea into my notes so I don't forget it for the next morning. I don't count on, the fact that I might remember it. I do that everywhere. So that's discipline. The discipline is when I have a thought and it's important for something I want to create, I talk it into my phone every time. I know if I don't put it in my phone, there's no way that thought's there tomorrow. So those are my routines. Change your routines, change your habits, become disciplined on your strategies. And strategies can be different for everybody, but don't leave your life up to chance. Set the goal for yourself, make the plan, back it up to the strategies that you're going to use, then set timers in your phone so you actually go do it. If it's not planned, it's not real. If it's not scheduled, it's not real. So have a plan, schedule it, make it real so that you can rock out your best life and make it easier. And then when you get through and you succeed once or twice, your brain's going to be so psyched for itself. And you'll be one of the people writing on the comments, I'm at day 56, I'm at day 180, I'm at day 400. That'll be you. You have to make the plan though. Okay, Jamie, is there anything else before we wrap up?
Well, we will be doing these weekly, and there is a theme every week. So stay tuned for the different themes that we'll be coming up with. A couple people are asking about the email address again. It's at pornbrainreboot.org, or you can email me at info at drtrishleigh.com. That's info at drtrishleigh.com.
Yeah, I can type it in here too. I'll type it in.
And it won't let me type in, so I'm sorry I'm not able to reply to people's comments.
You don't get those privileges. When we're on our meetings, Jamie controls the meeting, and I'm always like, "Will you give me the power? I got the power." I like to sing a lot. My kids, I shame my kids when I do it, but I'm always like, "Give me the power, sister, so I can share my screen." Yeah. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. I want to tell you one more thing, and you totally don't have to come if you don't want to, but I'm also doing YouTube lives starting today over on my other channel that is on neurofeedback and brain training. I've gotten a lot of requests to talk more about brain training, and I've dedicated that channel to it. So if anybody's interested, I'm going to be live there by myself. No Jamie. Maybe I can convince her in the upcoming weeks, but I'm going to be over there live myself at 2:30 p.m. for about a half hour, just talking about how you can train your brain yourself using the headband, how you can train your brain with a professional or an expert, and what the difference is, and what the process is and how it actually works, the tech behind it and how it works. So if you want to join me over there, you can. And if not, make a plan for this weekend. I want you all to feel awesome on Monday. I want you to get on track in your goals so that we can rock out another week. What is the name of the other channel? Good. Thank you, David, for that prompt. It is Brain Reboot, Dr. Trish Leigh. So it is over there, and the live is scheduled there. Brain Reboot, Dr. Trish Leigh, and you'll see I have hundreds of videos over there too on brain training. That channel's been around for a while, and next week's theme is going to be how to become a healthy partner to attract a healthy partner, because I want you all to find the honeys in the relationships that you want and you deserve. And we're also calling it how to have great sex and enjoy your partner too, right? Or how to have great sex and a great relationship. I know. How to have great sex and how to have a great relationship too. So look for that next week, the videos. And no, this channel is Porn Brain Reboot, Dr. Trish Leigh. The other channel, which actually I'm having my Dr. Trish Leigh website refreshed, and so we're going to name that channel over there Control Your Brain. So right now it's just to differentiate them a little bit. So right now it's called Brain Reboot, Dr. Trish Leigh. So thank you everybody for joining us, and as always, control your brain or it will control you. I'll see y'all next week. Jamie, thank you for joining me. I totally appreciate it.
You're welcome.
So much further. My brain doesn't feel like it's melted after trying to we're gonna have to figure out how to give you the power so you can chat with people in upcoming weeks. But okay, thanks. Have an awesome week. I'm Jamie, and everybody else have a great weekend. We'll see you next week.